When migrating a WordPress site using the database reset method, you have to follow 5 steps. The first step is to set up a new empty WordPress site on the new host. This site needs to be empty because when you migrate your database and your content over, chances are you'll overwrite what's already on the site. So set up a new blank WordPress site. Next, you need to copy your plugins, your themes, and the uploads folder from your existing host, be that your local host or your existing site, into the WP content folder in your new WordPress site on the new host. This is important because once you import the database will be looking for your plugins, it will be looking for your themes, and it will also be looking for all the images and other uploads you have on your site. So you need to move them to the server first. Third, you export your database from the current host through phpMyAdmin. Then you open that database in the text editor and fix the database URLs so that instead of pointing to either localhost or to the old host, the URLs point to the new host. And finally, you need to import the edited database into the new host through phpAdmin. When all this is done and is done correctly, you should see a duplicate of your original site on the new host. Consider the following scenario. I have a website I built on my local host, or I have a website I built on a server somewhere on the web. Now I want to duplicate all the content that includes all the settings, the content, and the images from my local host onto a new site that's live on the web somewhere. Normally, I would use the WordPress export and import function to export and import content into my new site. The problem is, because my original site sits on localhost, the new site does not have access to it. It can't simply go onto the internet and pull data off my computer and into itself. It's not possible. Instead, I have to move that data manually. In other words, if you try to use the WordPress import-export function, it won't work properly and you'll end up with a site that has no images. What I need to do instead is port all the content manually and then import a rewritten database that has all the right linkings to all the images and everything else on the site. The first step in the process is to set up a blank WordPress site, and that's exactly what I've done here. This is an empty WordPress site. It just has WordPress installed and it's connected to the database. That's all I need. The next step is to export all of my themes, my plugins, and my uploaded content from the local site to the new host on the web. I'm going to use an FTP application to do this. Here you can see I'm using FileZilla, and on the left here, I have my local install of WordPress, and on the right, I have the new install on the live web. Now I'm going to go to the WP content folder on both sides. I'll go into plugins on both sides, and then I'll see which plugins I have in my local install that I don't have in my external install. And I see there's two. There's these two. So I'm going to grab those and pull them over. When it's done, I'm going to do the same with themes. So I'll open my themes folder on the local side and the themes folder on the external side. And here I can either move all my themes, or I can just move the theme I'm currently using on my site on my local host. In this case, this truly minimal theme. So I'll grab that one and pull it over. And finally, I'll select the WP content folder on both sides. I'll grab the uploads folder and pull the entire folder over so it lands in WP content. Now, if you have a lot of uploads, meaning a lot of images or documents or other media, this might take some time. So this would be a good time to take a break and go grab a cup of coffee or do something else. Now that we've moved the plugins, themes, and uploads over to the live host, we can go and check inside WordPress. So I'll log in and take a look at themes. And I should see the new theme here, and I do. And I can also go into plugins and see that the plugins I uploaded appear. But if I go into media, you'll see I have no media files. That's because the database on our new WordPress website is not aware of these media files. So we have to now import the original database so that the database knows that there are media files there. Now that I have a blank WordPress install on the web, and I've exported all the content from WP content on my local installation into the new site, it's time to export the database from the original site so I can work with it. I'm going to do this through phpMyAdmin. And depending on how you're hosting your site locally on your computer or where you're hosting your original site on the web, you need to figure out how to get to PHP admin because it varies depending on the application you're using and also on the hosting provider you're using. If you are on localhost, it's usually a matter of going to your address bar and going to localhost/php myadmin. Sometimes you have to capitalize it. In that case, the M and the A are capitalized, but on my server, I need to have it all lowercase. Inside PHP myadmin, you go to databases. You find the database that's running your current WordPress site. In my case, that one is called SWAT. And once you can see that this is a WordPress database, and you can notice it because it has user meta, terms, posts, post meta, and so on as tables, you need to export this database, and you have to do it in a specific way. First step, click on Export, then select Custom. Make sure that all your database tables are selected. Scroll down and make sure it's checked as Save Output to a File. You need to make sure the compression is set to None and that the format is SQL. You can scroll past the format-specific options, and when you get to Object Creation options, you have to check Add Drop Table and uncheck Add Create Procedure. When that is configured, you can scroll to the bottom and click Go, and PHP myadmin will now create a .sql file that's basically a dump or a copy of your entire database. Now that you have the file, I recommend you show it in a folder, then create a new folder somewhere on your computer. So I'm going to go to my documents, and I'll create a new folder here called Backup. And I'm going to place my backup in this new folder. So I'll pull it over, and then immediately I'm going to make a copy. So I'll copy it and paste it and call this one SWAT_copy. Moving forward, I'm now only going to work with the copy, never the original. Now that you have an export of the original database from the original site, and you have a copy of that export, you can open that copy in a text editor. I'm going to open it in Notepad++, but you can open it in any text editor that has search replace functionality. When you're inside the database file, you need to look for entries that look like this. http://localhost/WordPress/. This is the type of entry that you now need to replace with a link to the new site. You should also scroll down and look to see if you have any other unspecified entries like this one that just says /WordPress/ and then WP content. Now you have to use a search replace function to replace both of these. But before you do anything, you need to know exactly what you are replacing. So if you go back to the browser, you'll remember I have my original site under localhost/WordPress. And my new site, if I go to the front end, is placed on a domain and maybe under a folder. So in my case, it's placed under morten.com/migration. So what I need to do is replace any entry that says localhost/WordPress with an entry that says morten.com/migration. I also need to replace any entry that just says /WordPress with just /migration. So I can do that using a search replace function. And here you'll see why it's so important that you use a copy of the export rather than the actual export, because if something goes wrong here and you're using the copy, you can just make another copy of the export and then do it again. Otherwise, you may have to re-export the whole file. So I'm gonna hit Control F on my keyboard to open Find, and here I'm gonna select Replace. In Find What, I'm gonna find http://localhost/WordPress. And I want to replace that with http:// and then my new site, and that is morten.com/migration. morten.com/migration. Now I want to replace all, so I'll click Replace All, and 312 occurrences were replaced. I can click OK, and now I'm going to do the same just for /WordPress. So I'll go in here and I say /WordPress should be changed to /migration. And you'll notice it's important that you start by doing a search replace for http://localhost/WordPress, and then afterwards do just the one with WordPress. Otherwise, you will lose a lot of the entries because you changed the full entry before you changed the small one. So now I'm going to do another search replace for WordPress to be replaced with migration. Click Replace All. Another 349 occurrences were replaced. And now my database should be fixed. I can see it up here. It now says morton.com/migration. And when I scroll down, you'll also see here it says /migration/WP content. So it looks like everything is correct now. I'm going to resave this file. So I'll click File, Save As, and I will call this SWOT updated. Click Save. And now I should have the original exported file, my copy of the exported file, and the updated file that has these new entries in it. If everything went correct here, I should now be able to import this SWOT updated file into my new host. With the rewritten, exported database from the original site, it's time to import that database into the new site on the web. Here I have my new site, and you can see it is a standard WordPress site with no content. Just to show you I'm not cheating, I'll show you it's one post, one page, one category, one comment, and one approved, and it's under morton.com/migration. I've also logged into the phpMyAdmin area for my web host. How you get to this place depends on your host and how that's set up. So you may have to read documentation to get here, or even contact them and ask how you get to phpMyAdmin. Once you're inside phpMyAdmin, it is also vital that you find the correct database to work with. You need to make sure that the database you are working with, in my case, this one called _migration, is in fact the database that's powering this website. If it's not, you'll run into big trouble very quickly, because the next step here involves deleting this database. If you want to make absolutely sure that you're working on the right database, you can make a small alteration to the database and see that alteration take place on your website. So I'm going to go to WP options here. And here you see I have all the entries for my site, including at the top here, an entry called blog name. So I'm going to go and change blog name to something else. So I'll call it test to see that this is the right database. And when I make that change, one row affected, and reload my site, you should see the title change to test to see that this is the right database. That means what I'm looking at right now, the migration database, is in fact the correct database. Now that I know I'm in the correct database, I can delete all the content in the database. So again, make sure you are in the correct database. If you are at all uncertain about this, stop right now. Only do this if you are absolutely certain this is the correct database for your new website and that you are ready to overwrite what's on it. All right? So I'm going to check all my tables, click under with selected, drop, and this will delete every piece of my data, meaning if you have anything on this database, it will disappear right now. Click yes, your database is deleted, and now you have no database in your table. If you want to check, you can go back to your site and reload it. And you should now land on the standard WordPress installer page, meaning there's currently nothing in the database. That means you can now import the original database into this new site. So I'm going to click import, browse for files, find SWOT updated, which is the one we altered the URLs in. Click open, scroll down, and click go. The file is now uploaded into the system. And when I click on structure, you'll see here we have the original database structure from the original website. And now, when I go back to morton.com/migration, which is the location of my new site, and I reload this page, I land on a site that looks exactly the same as the original site. That means I have all my theme settings in place, the theme is activated, I have my images, and all my content. Just to make sure, I can also go back to the back end. And here you need to log back in because you've now cleared the database and started over. So I have to go to WP-admin. Because this is, for all intents and purposes, a new database on a new site, you may have to update your WordPress database. So click Update WordPress Database and continue. And then you're taken to your login, where you can log in. And from here, you can see you have 9 posts, 1 page, 4 categories, 29 tags. And when you go to media, you see you have all the media content, meaning your site exported onto the web matches exactly the original site that sits on localhost. Now that all your content has been imported and everything looks like it's working properly, you have to make sure it actually works properly too. That means clicking on links throughout the site to make sure they actually point where they're supposed to, and pay special attention to your URL here to make sure it doesn't all of a sudden say localhost instead of your new site. You also need to go through your posts to make sure that your images are appearing and that your galleries are working and that everything is working as you would expect. This is very important because in some cases you have strange situations where, for example, you may have uppercase file extensions in the original server and you have lowercase file extensions in the new server, and images won't appear properly, and you may have to go in through FTP and change some file extensions or other elements. By doing a proper beta testing of your entire site now, looking through posts, clicking on links, and making sure everything works will ensure that you have a site that still works, even though it's now been exported onto a live host on the web.